This is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, November the 15th. Starting a little bit late. Yeah, pretty much just as soon as it gets into the winter daylight savings time, I tend to be fairly late in general. November 15th, I'm wondering if I'm not getting dangerously close to running out of scheduled content at this point, and I definitely need to take some extra effort to actually schedule some videos, schedule more videos. Over the weekend, I did play a little bit of Opus Magnum, but frankly, there's just nothing to really say about that game. It's all over the place. It's getting ridiculously complicated because it's asking for really big things to have to be built, and even at the 1080p resolution, you're still taking up the majority of your screen, I would suspect. And at the lower resolutions that they're supporting, you definitely are taking up more than the entire screen. Frankly, they should have just not bothered to support the lower resolutions and instead made for an effort to better improve their interface, because yeah, some of the builds I've done have just been insanely unmanageable because the macro in its pictorial button programming style is still way too long, or you're using way too many components, so vertically it's too long, so you can't see everything at a reasonable number of glances. I'm not even going to claim for a second that code should be something you could view all at once in a single glance, but you should be able to somewhat easily scroll through your code and generally know what's going on and generally be able to zone into different sections, particularly with like functional language, which like Opus Magnum, it's not programming language, it's macros. I have to just assume that my conjecture there is accurate. I probably can't play this, which means we'll just be playing the regular thing. Still, well, we just need to play ranked. Alright, that's not too bad. Just some ranked play of our own design. We're still heavily leaning towards Havencraft. As it is the deck that I guess I'm most familiar with, and the deck that feels like you can win with while slightly not paying attention compared to some of the other decks that might win as much or even more, but require a lot more focus. But yeah, if you're writing great code, your main function, assuming the programming language you use has a main function, is going to be relatively small, because you'll want to, particularly if you're writing functionalized code, like code that has functions and where it makes sense to have functions. At a certain level, I will be more lenient on not using functions if you are effectively putting, say, a function inside of a function, and while that function is being called twice or 3 times by the first function, it's not being called by any other function. That's almost approaching some of what was added to the class concept later on, is that you would just have these private functions internally that were just not used by anything else. And It definitely feels like a lot of class programming is from the idea of security, but I really don't think there is any real security in class programming versus any other programming. The security you would be gaining, I would think, would almost certainly have to be just security from somebody accidentally accessing or calling on data at a different point in the same code. Class programming might make sense at some point if you were giving half of a program to one person and half of a program to another person, or you had 10-20 people all programming the exact same program, if you're building something really big. But I mean,
goodbye is inevitable.
If you're programming in collaboration, it's insanely counterproductive to say, well, we're not going to let this employee see the other code. We're going to just put a divider on their knowledge and tell them, we're going to give you a function, we're going to tell you what the outputs are, we're not going to show you what's going on inside that code. That's kind of a ridiculous thought.
This is how you do fireworks. This is strange reading.
Okay, well then I guess you do this.
You're in good hands.
And that didn't work either. But yeah, compared to Opus Magnum, if you could have functions, I could totally, or something similar to functions, I could totally reduce the amount of code significantly. Maybe add a little bit of complexity, but not by much. The worst way you could write a function potentially in a game like Opus Magnum to A, not be efficient, and B, just be ridiculous would be to do the equivalent of writing a function that passes a variable for every single action you want it to do, since there's a limited number of actions. And so then effectively you would be putting a symbol or a word and then open parentheses, and then every single command that you could have just typed in manually anyways, close parentheses, and then probably like a semicolon, depending on what language you're using. That's the kind of thing that totally would be insane. But if somebody's that bad at making functions and did that, I think they'd fairly quickly realize that they were wasting their time doing that. Whereas a good program would be something that says there would be have a symbol or a name like step 1, and then no variables, or maybe just a simple single variable that might change something in one very specific instance and nothing else, keeping all the other motions uniform, because there would probably not be a need for any variety.
Shutting down.
But mostly what I did this weekend was move furniture. I swore I wasn't gonna move furniture. I had other people that were supposed to move furniture, but it was getting late in the evening and I stupidly became too generous with my own later injury, which was exactly what I knew was going to happen, is that I was going to be in incredible pain the next day, and after moving furniture, and and that's exactly what happened. But the good news is I was able to finally move a nice recliner chair into the position where I sit when I record, compared to a office chair that was falling apart. And so now I'm sitting in this recliner chair, which is a bit lower. Everything got moved around, so the microphone might sound a little different going forward now. There is a real danger now that I could get too comfortable. This chair would allow me to potentially lean back quite a bit. It's got a lot more foam cushioning, and it's got a leg, well, it's a recliner, it's got a leg support, so you can lean back. And so I could see a scenario where
Now you've done it.
I could see a scenario where I just get like a little too comfortable pre-recording footage, playing something like Opus Magnum in particular, because those tend to be like 3-hour episodes. 3-hour episodes to accomplish maybe 2 puzzles. No, I'm getting 2 puzzles, but I was at one point hoping to get 3 or 4.
I'm not late, am I?
But yeah, in a game like that, when there's really not a lot to say later on, I could see just getting fairly comfortable there. Where proper recording, like, would dictate that I probably would want a chair that was forcing me forward a little bit more to sit upright and lean into the microphone a little bit more. But I also wouldn't be surprised if there was actually zero noticeable difference, and I have severely overkilled the focus on like my microphone and my sound. Like it would be very hard to justify doing much more with the microphone.
The time for perennial prayer has come.
You were done for.
I've also decided that
Salvation and devotion.
it's fairly stupid
Eternal supplication.
it's fairly stupid to constantly
In such a hurry.
in each stream have to reset my web peak to a specific display, particularly now that I'm using the Tableau over the air DVR, and I'm actually using it quite a bit right now as more of a burn-in test. I imagine I will slowly
How fun it is to
work
converse.
work my way back to not watching a lot of TV. But right now I'm watching a lot of TV on the Tableau.
Fire.
So that is
Fire.
switching the number of the monitors around, and so OBS has to be reset. And there's really no reason to it, because I could always do window capture, and window capture on Chrome, having multiple Chrome windows open, is kind of a hassle still.
I envy you.
But it is the more correct thing. I didn't like it because it did this yellow bar around the edges when it's recording, but on second thought, that's actually a good thing, because now when I look at my second monitor and look at my Chrome browser and see that there is no yellow box around it, then I know I'm not in the web peak, and as soon as I do see the yellow box, I know I have transitioned into the web peak. So it's actually the Windows feature of putting a yellow box around anything that's being captured, which is a security thing that you can't really turn off. I imagine there might be a way to turn it off. It's probably just not worth researching it. That really is a case of just reevaluating things and thinking things through, and instead of just having the knee-jerk reaction of different is wrong and not what I want. I should have thought it through some more and seen the positives of having a yellow box pop up. Also, over the weekend, I watched Elvira, Mistress of the Darks, which is a movie about Elvira, which is good cornball fun, I would say. No, not particularly great movie by any means, but it clearly never would have been, and shouldn't have been. It would be shocking if you made a movie about Elvira and it was great. Honestly, like Addams Family Values and the Addams Family movies, which I guess the Addams Family movie would be the first one, and Family Values would be the second one, and then I think there's even a third one.
You don't know when to quit.
It's kind of shocking that they spent that much money to make those movies as polished as they were, when cheesy, low budget would have probably been what I would have just assumed a Addams Family movie would have and should have been.
I'll head the vanguard. You're on.
Yeah, we had a short stream last time because I was falling asleep. There's a danger again, I'll fall asleep. Yeah, on top of just kind of waking up late, I'm also not really accomplishing much because I'm waking up and between doing other things,
I'll be back for round 2.
or just not doing anything in general, I'm also kind of falling asleep for 4 hours and then staying awake for maybe 8 hours and then falling asleep for 4 hours each day, and then maybe falling asleep again for another 8 hours. This would do a lot of damage, and this may just be our best bet.
Heaven demands it.
There's a lot more where that came from.
Divine judgment awaits. Grovel.
Kind of silly, but kind of silly situation, as part of moving the furniture around was I actually got rid of some furniture and have made room to buy different furniture, which is a level of insanity, but I'm trying to get the right furniture specifically for my Lego collection.
It won't be long now.
And I had
This thing's more
failed
vicious than a
to successfully measure twice and cut no times in this case with a bookshelf, and so I had purchased a bookshelf that was off color, which honestly matching colors on bookshelves is going to be kind of impossible always, and the only way you're going to even have a slight chance of success there is if you just buy all your furniture at once, which I'd heavily recommend, because furniture at this point does feel like it's mostly a gamble, and so your best bet, I think, is to probably
It's too late for everything.
your best bet is to probably buy everything you want at the same time. Like, I got some really cheap, basically Walmart white bookshelves, and I got 4 at a time. And they don't look great, but they don't look really much worse than any other bookshelf you would get. They're all pretty much the same. I did see that apparently now there is a brand that is literally not even putting screws in their furniture. It is just double-sided tape and pegs, and that's a level of insanity. Yeah, I know the joke is that assembling furniture is a nightmare, but if you can't put together a bookshelf, you don't deserve to own a bookshelf. You probably don't own any books. Most bookshelves these days have cam lock screws, which while you might not know the name cam lock, which I'm fairly certain is what they're called, you'll definitely recognize them in that they are these cheap pewter pieces of metal, round things that go in round holes, and they lock onto the back of these really long screws that screw into another piece, and that creates a right angle tensioning force to hold everything together and lock it down. Very easy to break the cheap pewter round cam locks, I guess is what they'd be called. I mean, in all honesty, if you were doing real furniture joining, you would instead just glue and screw everything together, but they don't want to put any screw holes or pegs to fill screw holes on the exterior parts of bookshelves. If you were doing good bookshelf building, you would also put an actual back with some rigidity and some support on the back of bookshelves, which nobody does. It's now either completely open back in a few cases or cardboard, basically poster board,
If I turned tail and ran, there wouldn't be a dragon.
used as the backing.
Check out my fancy footwork. Ooh. I'll be back for round 2.
So, yeah. And in a funny way, instead of buying new bookcases immediately, I'm thinking I'm going to put off buying bookcases because I'm putting myself in kind of a weird position where I want to build a bigger Lego table by assembling several basically record cases that don't even have backs, which actually works very well for my design. And so there are these 8 cubicle record box frames, basically, for lack of a better term, that
Did someone see me?
that I plan on putting on their side, and they're designed to be rotated on their side, and I plan on putting 6 of them, which at certain that just goes to talk about the large amount of scale that I'm trying to build here. Is like effectively I'm building what is the equivalent of 1.5 table widths of a standard like kitchen table, and close to, if not over, 2 standard kitchen table lengths. If you have a rectangular kitchen table, which you would, or dining room table, is probably the closer to the size. Like the real dimensions is somewhere approaching 100 inches long and 45 inches wide. When the 6 units are put in an array of 3 by 3, not 3 by 3, but 3 by 2. And because they have record sized cubbies, that means you could put like fairly large bins in the cubbies and turn them into like drawers if you wanted to, or since it's all for Lego, the bigger expert Lego sets are fairly big, but I don't think any of them are so big that they would be outside 15 by 15 inches, which is basically the size of a long play record, which means that they are going to be really large, separated, cubicle type
This victory is
designs.
a testament to your strength.
Yeah, and I'll have to rethink it, because for a brief moment I was considering putting a couple more. Instead of buying 6, I'm buying 8 and putting 2 on the side. But if you put 2 on the side, they really wouldn't line up. And yeah, I think I rejected it because the size does not match. They didn't build it at a ratio to work for that. And they would just sit on the floor, so it's not like it actually is a Lego table as much as it is a raised platform sitting on the floor, more like a coffee table, 30 inches off the floor, because it's 2 15 cubicles, or probably a little bit more than 30 inches off the floor, which is the same height as a kitchen table anyways. It's just you really couldn't stick your legs under it or put a chair up against it. But yeah. And in all honesty, these record cabinets, because they don't have a back and they are effectively just a few pieces of wood, and even though wood is rather expensive now, it's a few pieces of particle board, I imagine, really. The price for them is about a third of buying a single bookcase. But if I want to get the room really, really nicely done, that there is enough room for building the Lego table and potentially buying like 3 more bookcases. But the bookcases are approaching $300, $350 each, where a single record thing is selling for like $114. Furniture is incredibly expensive, but it tends to last unless you manage to break it, which
A precious life deserves a precious
or you
life.
buy
More jewels,
incredibly cheap stuff.
And so our pact
bookcases in general, even if you get a cheap bookcase though, if you're screwed against the wall and are willing to say, well, if I can get this, if you can assemble it, put it against the wall, screw it to a wall anchor so it doesn't tip over, you could easily leave a cheap $100 bookcase with the house when you leave, when you move out, and not be upset about it. Whereas more expensive furniture follows you, so it has to really be worth it, because it's going to follow you with every move you make, and the chances of you living in the same house
Good enough.
for extremely long amounts of time
Check out my fancy footwork.
is not particularly high. Like, you'll spend 10, 15 years in a house, maybe even 30 or 40, but you're going to move at least a couple times in your lifetime.
and so our pact is forged.
I've probably moved more than I should have
Wasn't good enough.
over the course of my
You have
lifetime, and every
summoned
time
the blade of purgation.
every time moving big furniture is just more of the nightmare of moving and more of the expense. Do we need to talk about anything else as far as the accountability section? Or honestly, that was probably too much. We need to cover the news, and we need to catch up on the
A precious life deserves a precious death.
catch up on the games that came out on
More?
Friday. Okay.
Show me the limits of your will. You will
So,
soon
WWE 2K
yourself
Dev
in this
on
final
Twitter
dance.
has put out, "We're not leaving, we're just moving to @WWE Games." I don't know to get all future WWE 2K Dev updates. I don't know why you would. Well, no, I don't know why I'm following this guy. No, I'm not. This was retweeted by somebody else. You could take this as one of two ways. You could be positive, and you could say, well, this means that the WWE has solidified and renewed a contract with 2K, and there's much less of a chance that WWE would break its contract with 2K. Although, frankly, I think there was very little chance they'd ever break their contract with them anyways, because I don't think WWE cares. And if they did care, they would have forced them to make better games a long time ago.
And so our pact is
Or you could take it the other way, and you could see that this is
You have summoned
actually
the
a case
blade of
where
purgation here.
WWE is moving in a direction to break its contract with 2K, and so they want to start moving all of their traffic and everybody who looks for WWE games to a different Twitter feed.
I'll see you in purgatory.
witness the power.
One
Burn the sight of living flame into your eyes. Like the moon.
Yeah,
on water's
I could kind of I could see it either way, but also I just couldn't care, so doesn't really matter too much to me one way or the other. So it only starts to matter to me if the wrestling game started to get good. If there was even one good wrestling game that came out, I would be more than happy to cover it as a way of saying, hey, this is the one wrestling game that's been good in probably decades. Check it out, play it, and then stick with it probably for more decades until the next wrestling game comes out.
Wanna play with Kaguya-stro?
I imagine there is like one decent wrestling game from 15 years ago that people should still be playing instead of the new games. And I honestly think there's not really a good argument for roster updates in wrestling as much as there is in real world sports, because the contractors, ridiculously labeled as contractors, wrestling roster at WWE does not change that much. And if you have a custom character creator, you could probably create any new characters. IGN got tweeted. Xbox put out 70 more backwards compatible games, but apparently Xbox backward compatibility list won't add any more games after today's massive update. This massive drop will be the last set of games that has added. Xbox announced licensing and legal constraints meant it could no longer add games to backward compatibility. Probably could, but they just probably don't care. So, yeah. Wow, IGN is just full of ads, even just like read back ridiculous amounts of advertisements in the middle of their articles. Like, and clearly this is like a great example of me having never even used IGN as a source, because there's never been a point here where I've tried to clean things up. Without spending a lot of time on going through without spending a lot of time going through the compatibility list, I will generally say that I don't feel like there's that much really missing as far as the backwards compatibility list. And honestly, I think the Xbox is doing like an excellent job compared to PlayStation or Nintendo, which Nintendo really doesn't have a backwards compatibility list or any backwards compatibility. They were just re-releasing things, trying to sell it to you again. And PlayStation has some backwards compatibility, but not really enough to say it's a good effort.
I have been waiting for
Verifying access.
I'll be back for round 2. Oh, this is gonna be fun. The battlefield is my cutting board. How fun it is to converse.
Sorry, I'm focusing on making the page look better instead of writing here. So here's what I did with IGN as far as using uBlock Origin to block a ton of ads here. So now we have a regular page with a regular article, and got rid of line dividers, got rid of the headers and the base parts that, like, arguably you could take out this in this article section 2 and save yourself a little bit, but if it's at the bottom it doesn't matter. I'm a little surprised that there isn't share buttons anywhere on IGN that I saw.
There's a lot more where that came from. Hard-headed as a clam? No, thank you.
But yeah,
I'll make
I
your taste
think
buds quiver.
like I think what you're gonna run into is just a small list of, like, maybe not backward compatible games from Xbox 360 era, and very little probably from the original Xbox era games are worth playing, even if they are backward compatible. And I would assume that you have 100% backward compatibility with an Xbox One to an Xbox Series console. If anything, this potentially sets up a situation where the value add has now run out. That extra boost, that nitro in your fuel tank for the Xbox Games Pass service and well, the Xbox, not the Games Pass service actually.
Demonic blades have
Just
nothing on mine.
the extra push to sell a new console has run out now.
Fresh supplies.
So there's
What is this weird feeling?
unlikely to be a case when the next Xbox comes out where they're going to be able to use backwards compatibility as a selling point. And that's
I'll head the vanguard.
they're gonna have to find a new trick, I suppose, because it will be
I'll make your taste buds quiver.
just the current lineup, whatever the current lineup is, selling the next Xbox, assuming there is a next Xbox after the Series X.
Oh dear, I'm not.
And by the time there is a new Xbox after the Series X, any licensing legal issues could be in completely different situations at that point. So, so you could easily at that point find out that they can renegotiate some things. I mean, there's rumors that GoldenEye 64 is somehow going to come back, although I think those rumors kind of constantly happen. We'll talk a little bit about YouTube. I don't know why I particularly cover YouTube news. Apparently, YouTube is launching the first holiday stream and shop. This is Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube. The
Now to trample all over.
Merrill twins, don't know.
No bruise
I guess I've seen these two, but I don't think I've seen them in 3 or 4 years. We'll kick off a week-long live stream bought by the partners Walmart, Samsung, and Verizon. So, like, very much Black Friday advertisement happening on YouTube, which is exactly what YouTube's CEO should be doing. Like,
Why are you in such a hurry?
her 2 latest tweets, when she does bother to tweet, are actually right on target, where she should be helping the advertisers that fund YouTube feel like honored guests of YouTube and the customers of YouTube, because that's really the truth of it. And also her retweeting that apparently Japan shows that the latest YouTube creative ecosystem contributed 239 billion to the Japanese GDP and supports 75,970 jobs, which is definitely not a drop in the bucket.
Did someone see me?
But yeah, those two tweets are kind of what she should do, is that she should be, for the most part,
Ready to witness my true strength?
treating the customers nicely. Because let's face it, like,
My way through.
the customers are not the viewers of YouTube videos, as far as YouTube looks at it, and as far as any content creator should look at it, because the YouTube viewers are effectively the product, and you're selling the viewers' eyeballs to the advertisements. And so, yeah, the viewers of YouTube videos are the product, which that is standard practice pretty much for any advertisement-based
Victory is a testament to
business,
our
anything that's free. And people certainly flippantly say the same thing in better ways than I do a lot, but they often say it as if it's a scenario that everybody would and could financially pay for everything. Like YouTube Blue, I mean Twitter Blue is kind of a great example of an elitist, ridiculous idea of a paid, better version of Twitter, while Twitter itself is not that good. Like, it's always been the case, for the most part, that you could buy DVDs and Blu-rays for the past 20 years instead of
Bow
paying
before
for
Dark
cable.
Dragoon, ruler of
But
the skies.
This one's for my
a
family.
lot of people don't want the delay. They don't want to own a Blu-ray or DVD after the fact. And they've realized that clutters up your houses, particularly if you're only going to watch something once. Like, people are somewhat paying for a premium of things like Netflix, which advertises very little, but still advertises its own Netflix content. So a lot of people are paying for that, but a lot of people aren't also. And I don't think there really is room for success in the next 10 years at least for a YouTube Red type experience for most people. Some people do get YouTube Red to reduce or completely remove. I'm not sure if it actually does completely remove advertisements. Of course, you could also just get YouTube Vanced or any other app that just blocks ads on YouTube. And you really should. Like, even as a content creator, as somebody who at some point maybe will get 1,000 subscribers and be back in the YouTube Partner Program and would get back to getting advertisement revenue. Until that point happens, and for most other channels and most other cases, I would say you probably should use YouTube Red. I mean YouTube Vanced, not YouTube Red. Because frankly, an individual's time and effort and sanity is worth more than a collective few pennies that a content creator would get giving 30% to YouTube and promoting the general idea of rampant consumerism and capitalism through the advertisements you're looking at. there's just on the scale of who is it benefiting somebody versus is it hurting somebody, I think YouTube advertisements are hurting a lot more people and hurting society in general a lot more than they're even benefiting the individual advertiser. At a certain level, that is what advertisement is the idea of irritating or wasting the time of a whole bunch of people because it doesn't cost the company anything to waste the time and irritate a whole bunch of people, and as long as they get a small percentage of profit from their advertisement, they're happy. Whereas if you knew someone who was as annoying and repetitive as TV commercials, for instance, you would probably eventually have to come to blows with that person, or like completely avoid that person in reality. Now, I will say, if you see somebody that barely has 1,000 subscribers and they're a small YouTube content creator, I think make a special effort to launch on your cell phone the actual YouTube app instead of YouTube Advanced. But if you're watching, just to pick a random person, PewDiePie, the biggest YouTuber ever, if you're watching his videos, I don't think he cares if 10% of his viewers stopped watching ads. And I don't think you as an individual should care if that happened. See if this works.
These skies.
Ready to witness my true strength?
You want the world? Shut up and burn! You're a fiery one.
Okay.
You're
on! Of course, well, I can applaud Susan Wojcicki for her last two tweets. Then you also have her retweeting Trans Week Awareness, which is to SJW woke for at least half of the people on YouTube. And then you have her completely ignoring what is the growing controversy of them hiding the dislike count and claiming that that's going to improve anything, when anyone in their right mind who thinks things through probably knows it won't make things better, and that it is really just a ridiculous, dumb idea to either appease advertisers or appease SJWs. Even the concept of like hate mobs coming to people's channels and disliking videos as a game. I mean, I'm sure it happens in a very small point, but it hardly is something I think that happens enough for them to really bother to address, when there's so many other things they need to be working on instead. That they are intentionally focusing in on making changes they want instead of making changes that they need to make.
You have angered me.
It's the equivalent of having a child and telling him to make his bed, and instead he takes the trash out. It's like, well, that's nice, but it's not what we asked for. Or and yeah, it's ridiculous. Let's see, do I have any other hate? Yeah, not hate, but like passionate anger against YouTube getting rid of the dislike count.
This conflict ends
I
now.
personally, I don't care. Like, I think in a lot of ways,
Flames have got your back.
what we're approaching here is a point in which I think society is going to have to realize that we cannot accommodate, and we should just spook off weak people that need safe spaces. We can't turn YouTube into this padded wall safe space and have it still be an effective venue in which you can broadcast yourself to the world. Ideally, I would like to see Susan Wojcicki forced out. They don't have to do it nasty. I don't need to dance on her grave and have her fired or anything, but I think Alphabet really should at this point say, you've done it. You've done this for this long. It is not gotten any better. You've had ridiculous amounts of controversies. It's been accused that Susan Wojcicki is only the CEO of YouTube because she's a woman, which that's probably not fair, but at all, but it's been accused, certainly. And keeping her to disprove that when she's done a bad job is not smart either. As a just generic boss, she's done a bad job. She needs to be replaced. Just get some fresh blood in there at all. Like, but yeah, we don't need, YouTube makes up a significant portion of the internet. We don't need YouTube to effectively be trying to create a safe space or a censored sub-internet website to this level of extreme. People, way more creators need the dislike count to be public, or the ridicule of them hiding the dislike count, which they could have already done. Like, there's plenty of people out there that straight up turned off the, I'm kind of just making all the same arguments everybody else has made, but plenty of people turn off thumbs up, thumbs down in comments already, and if somehow they are getting ridiculed somewhere else because they've disabled that, well, then they deserve that ridicule because that's what they actually did. And at a certain point, it is just propaganda to label something as ridicule, even though that is just the word I used, for having to live with your own decisions and be held to your own actions and your own decisions. At a certain point, removing the dislike counter and getting rid of that source of potential public ridicule not only hurts society, but it is creating a situation where people can more do whatever they want and be insulated from any feedback or criticism, which is not good for anybody. In a lot of ways, it feels like probably Susan Wojcicki, as the CEO, lives in a world that is very much like the world they're trying to create on YouTube by hiding the dislike count. And the last thing I'll say on this topic is that one of the YouTube middle managers or channel brand managers has reached out to Linus Tech Tips to talk to him, since Linus Tech Tips also complained about the removal like almost everybody else. But don't fall for it. Like, there is a very obvious pattern in which YouTube makes a decision. They really don't consult any of the creators, content creators, by which I mean they don't even consult the top 100 content creators, the biggest earners, at all. And they make a decision. They often lie and say they have consulted with creators, but who they've consulted with is probably a hand-selected group of a dozen at most, flaming SJW YouTubers, which is far too small of a sample size for any honest dealings. And then they send out the channel managers and the PR people to give interviews and listen and take that feedback and say that they'll do something with it, when really the people that are there just to try and smooth it over. They obviously want to try and get the big YouTubers to be the brand ambassadors of YouTube and advertise YouTube more than even the big YouTubers on channels. And they want these big YouTubers to support every decision YouTube makes. They're trying to turn a lot of YouTubers into sycophantic yes men, which I don't know particularly what turns somebody into a sycophantic yes man, but pretending like giving special attention and pretending like you're listening to feedback is probably step one. But YouTube has also been incredibly inefficient at that, because as soon as you're talking to YouTubers and they're not talking to just other Google YouTube employees, and they're just not talking to your standard yes man that lives in California and agrees with everybody always, people who actually make content realize that this idea is dumb. It would, if Linus, for instance, from Linus Tech Tips, came back after this interview and said, oh, well, he made a lot more sense and he explained things to me, and now I'm actually for this, I think then his own audience would dislike him and stop watching him. Linus from Linus Tech Tips in particular is the exact example of somebody they should have talked to first before they even thought about announcing the removal of the dislike counts, considering how Linus Media Group, who he's in charge of, has their own streaming service called Floatplane. They advertise like crazy. They deal with likes and dislikes like crazy, so that they know they would know everything about it and be able to give real informed opinion, compared to even somebody like PewDiePie, who doesn't really have his own streaming service and only runs his one channel. And I think almost certainly PewDiePie has asked people to balance the likes and dislikes, and use that as a game as far as the count. And if that was what they were trying to combat, I'd say that probably happens more than the idea of disliking en masse. And the announcement video of removing the dislike count, ironically, has a ton of dislikes.
I've been keeping this. I'll blast my way through.
Which I'm sure YouTube will not take any of that to heart and will think people are just being trolls and disliking for the fun of it, which a percentage definitely are, but there is real hate for this idea. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says a list of Battlefield 2042 known issues and bugs has been published. Nintendo says it's taking its criticism of the Switch's Nintendo 64 emulation, quote, very seriously. Doug Bowser claims the company is looking at ways to improve the Switch online games. In a lot of ways, though, Doug Bowser, the new Nintendo of America CEO, is still just an advertiser for Nintendo of Japan. It is ridiculous how little is actually programmed and not just localized by Nintendo of America. Users, we have now officially crossed the line, at least Video Games Chronicle has crossed the line now. Crossed the line to using the phrase review bombing completely inaccurately and just meaning review bombing now in Video Game Chronicles as a phrase is suspect and very easily means that a game is just being accurately reviewed and getting negative reviews. This would make more sense if it said GTA reviews are bombing, or GTA is bombing reviews. The GTA Trilogy is, as Metacritic as issues mount, which there's no bombing going on here, in the sense that there's no dishonesty or not gameplay related reviewing happening here. The GTA Trilogy are edgy games from the old day. They are hardly SJW games that people would have a problem with, and it's not like there's enough actual SJW gamers out there that would complain about, like, I tried to move just a little bit and tinged my back there. There's so few actual SJW people that play games that are going to come back and say, oh, the boobs are too big on this person, or this girl's in a bikini, or these games show characters in a bad light. Like, the GTA Trilogy has been completely unplayable and removed from stores. It's had major problems with the visuals, at least on the Switch version. It's just not a good deal. And the biggest revelation, I think, now is that they users seemingly have uncovered the content that was related to the hot coffee mod, which the hot coffee minigame, I guess, was in the code originally for San Andreas, and then you needed a mod to bring back that code and get it playable. Otherwise it wasn't playable. But they seem to have done such a poor job in this remake that they didn't even see fit to remove that content completely, which would be fairly easy to remove, because they almost certainly have already removed it. There is also claims that the music that was removed for licensing.
Is fighting and despair all you know? I guess you're looking for a fight.
The licensed music apparently is actually in there, or at least the references are in there to the licensed music, but the files are missing. That would probably be the easiest way to do it. It does definitely feel like very little effort was put onto this. But that's not review bombing by any means. Like, these are legitimate gameplay issues to the max. Like, you would be insane to even try and argue differently. Like, and I know there are crazy people out there that would try to argue it, but when you literally have the game removed, when you literally can't buy it, when you've potentially pre-ordered this and were excited and anticipating it, and now you're potentially being sold what is just a pile of garbage, low effort port, you have every right to voice your displeasure. And frankly, Video Game Chronicles calling that review bombing is the exact same scenario So we're seeing this happen from different angles, from different people, as the previous story of getting rid of the dislike button. Both of those scenarios are this idea, and we've seen it in video games in multiple places, where you come from the intellectually dishonest false narrative that all feedback is bad, or all gamers are bad. And when you come from that intellectually dishonest perspective, if you have drunk the Kool-Aid and that's the way you're looking at the world, then it leads you down the path of making completely wrong decisions and stupid decisions, for lack of a better term. Yeah, it is for lack of a better term, a extremely childish position to put yourself in, instead of trying to come in with clean hands, clean eyes, clean mind, and saying, let me evaluate this situation, let me look at what's happening here, and then let me form an opinion for this specific situation. If you're going to bring in such an incredible bias, you've already set yourself up to not be able to really eat at the big kids table, basically, and have a adult honest discussion. And sadly, there is just kind of a high number of supposedly adults who are coming from those kinds of intellectually dishonest, biased positions. And society as in general has not been trained well to deal with that, because particularly I'd say in the United States, where I was raised in the West, the only argument against somebody who is just going to make ridiculous claims and be intellectually dishonest and just does not even really have the education, and they rejected any education they were given to the level of being able to have proper communication and find the truth amongst constructive debate. Like, when you're dealing with somebody like that, you really can't do much. I mean, throw them in jail, punch them in the mouth. I mean, it sounds like it's violent solutions are really the only solution, but that kind of is the truth. Like, when you have somebody that's just being childish and going, no, not true, you're wrong, you really can't do much with that. Like, they're not willing to listen at that point, so those should not be the people that you should be in the conversation individually with you. I hate to potentially make a deplatforming argument, but in a lot of ways you should personally deplatform people who are going to be childish and intellectually dishonest in conversations. Unfortunately, SJWs are often allowed the platform, or have bullied their way into a platform. Fortunately for most people, that they are so insane that they show themselves to be insane as soon as they open their mouth in most cases, but that doesn't stop a lot of people from listening still. And the major danger certainly is if you are a reasonable, logical person, who's to say how many of those are actually in existence on the planet, or even if you personally are one, if you may think you are, and and in a lot of ways have blind spots you don't even see that actually would prove you aren't. But if you are a logical, reasonable person, you come from almost always the blind spot of thinking everyone else is a logical, reasonable, honest person. And so you think, oh, these people, you can fall into the trap, certainly, of thinking, oh, these people just don't understand, and I can explain it to them. Yeah, if I'm just a good enough educator, if I'm just a good enough explainer, I can explain this to them, and then they're going to have a breakthrough, and then they're just going to go, oh, you're right, when that's never going to happen. They've got their fingers in their ears. If you were going to explain something to them, you're going to have to pull the fingers out of the ears, which is, again, throw them in jail or slug them. And I don't know what crime or law you could even create. At a certain point, it's too dangerous to have a law against lying. But I don't know, like, it's illegal to have like certain political leanings in Germany. Maybe that is the direction that all societies should go, is that it would just is straight up illegal to have incredible SJW leanings. Particularly, you could say it wouldn't be an insane thought. It would take a lot of thought and careful consideration. But I don't think it would be too crazy to potentially say it's illegal to promote or propagandize against anti-constitutional rights. So the freedom of speech would then become so much protected that even an SJW potentially promoting the idea of censorship should lead to some kind of fine, not real jail time, unless they're just a huge deep offender. Although arguably everything should be jail time and there should be no fines, because if there are fines, then the rich are effectively allowed to do anything they want, whereas the poor are then thrown in jail because they're not paying the fines. So that creates a two-class legal system. Yeah. So theoretically, in a perfect world, you could, with a lot of careful thought, make a law that says if you propagandize, promote, or just try and push the idea of censorship, that's against the Constitution. You're promoting an unconstitutional idea there. You should be thrown in an extremely minimal security prison for a week or two. If you got rid of fines, then yeah, there probably would be just really minimal prisons where a lot more people are getting thrown in jail for very minor offenses. Which honestly, that would probably work very well. If every time you had a speeding ticket, you got thrown in jail for even 24 hours, all of a sudden it is not worth it at that point to ever speed. You have fixed the problem of speeding. Also, you fixed the problem of the police trying to profit or make bigger budgets off of giving false speeding tickets. Because then there wouldn't be any funding if there were never tickets going to the government ever. In fact, throwing people in jail would be extremely expensive, and it would then be prioritized, I imagine, to not pull people over when speeding unless they are speeding incredibly unsafely.
Delta cannon rioters. You're done for.
And
I could
if
get
you
used
did
to
make
this fame.
it illegal, I mean, you're effectively violating the freedom of speech to protect the freedom of speech by saying directly in these specific situations, you're not legally allowed to speak. This isn't any different from what it is in the United States now. You're never allowed to threaten people directly. You're not allowed to cause great harm and damage and lie about people without being sued for slander or liable.
Thunderbolts shall guide you, if they don't kill you first.
The greater your sin, the crispier I make you.
Pain, go away.
You're not allowed through free speech to divulge classified information, things like that. So there's always been limitations to the level of free speech, and really, I think the intent of the idea of freedom of speech is
It won't be long
simply to not make it illegal to criticize the government, which was the case, or criticize the king, which was the case in England. Which even now, I mean, I think you probably could criticize the monarchy and the Queen in the UK, but
You'll make a good test subject. How fun it is to converse.
there's just entire generations in which that is not the standard and the norm, and it has allowed the monarchy in the UK to stay around for a lot longer than it probably should have. And if you were going to make it illegal to speak against something that is enshrined heavily into the Constitution, you probably would do that for everything in the Constitution. The Constitution is not that long. You probably would say, yes, in indirect political conversations you can criticize things, but you cannot then preach it in public discourse. You almost certainly exempt politicians from criticizing rules and regulations.
The time for perennial prayer has come.
But yeah, that same law would be probably applied to the idea of the right to bear arms if they determined whether that's the right to bear arms in your well-maintained militia or just the right to bear arms in general. But yeah, I could see making a law say, as long as this is constitutional, promoting the idea of getting rid of the rights of the right to bear arms would be a great way to throw a bone to the other side,
Shining faith will
like,
carry you.
An opportunity
and
for growth.
keep both sides equally dissatisfied. And like, atheists would also get caught up in that if there were extreme atheists out there that said there should be a law that says you don't have the freedom of religion, they would get thrown in jail or fined too, which really wouldn't affect most atheists. I think atheists in general want to convince individuals to not go to church. They don't want to create a atheist state or a communist type Stalin style state that completely forces the elimination of religion, or China like state now would be the more modern example. Yeah. Yeah, I could see with some careful thought you could easily make it illegal to preach
This one's for my
things
family.
like Germany does that are anti-constitutional. And particularly if you're only enshrining the Constitution and not making it illegal to speak out or preach or propagandize against every law ever. It would create a higher tier system that effectively already exists as far as laws, and give even extra protections to the Constitution. There is, again, if you are a more reasonable person, there is also the danger of feeling like, well, sunshine is the best disinfectant, and if everybody just spouts their own opinions, the bad opinions will be immediately recognized and dismissed and have no effect. Honestly, I don't think that's ever been the case. You wish it was the case, but it just isn't. Like we've seen too many historical cases of Salem witch trials, for instance, and mob mentality, and just stupid people being put in charge, and mad kings being put in charge, and way more people suffer than benefit from the idea of everybody being given an equally weighted soapbox to stand out and speech.
Hey, this wasteland's a fixer-upper.
If anything, what I'm suggesting right now is also fairly far away from my usually rampant free speech mentality. But
This thing's more vicious than a nine-headed dragon.
Stop!
yeah. We have to, I think, look and realize that in modern times, it's not just a soapbox on the corner. In fact, it's pretty much impossible to get a soapbox and stand on the corner and give a speech very often. It is now a much more interconnected world where certain people are getting access and being able to shout
What you want.
at a level
This
that is
conflict ends
equivalent to if you were shouting on a bullhorn and reaching half
It
the
won't be long
planet
now.
or a quarter of the planet. Like,
Are those
it would always have been illegal to shout so loud
No!
when speaking that you were disturbing entire neighbors. And at a certain effect, that is what getting the ear of somebody like Susan Majewski has become, is that you are effectively
I'm already a
shouting,
proper lady, you know.
not actually shouting, but effectively creating an audio level that is reaching so many more people. And that there might actually be value that needs to be considered in the fact that when it was one person that could only speak as loud as their own voice, and even in cities they have the rules where you can't use bullhorns or magnifiers, and that's why you often see in marches people leading chants and needing large groups of people to go to marches. And ironically, every time you see an SJW march, if there even is one, there's barely 12 people there. Yeah, and it kind of sucks to have to be so SJW, because in a lot of ways I am probably extremely liberal and would be politically on the spectrum closer to them if they weren't just so far obsessed with very few topics and trying to achieve their goals, which are kind of bad goals in the first place, in the most ridiculous ways possible. Yeah, if SJWs were pushing a kind of ridiculous concept of like every able-bodied adult was forced to, or every able-bodied family is forced to adopt another kid. So if you have at least one kid, you're forced to adopt another kid until there are no more kids to adopt. At least that would be something that I would say, all right, well, let's think about that, or at least that's a ridiculous thing to push to get to something that is a reasonable goal. But when your goals are, let's disable the dislike counter on YouTube, or let's get Twitter and a whole bunch of other websites to censor things, or let's call legitimate game reviews for legitimate complaints about a game literally not being playable, review bombing. I mean, there's just no middle ground there at all. Moving on. I'm supposed to be talking about video games and I'm rambling. Quantic Dream's Star Wars game could be called Eclipse and set during the High Republic era. I have no idea what the High Republic era is. There are sources according to Video Games Chronicles that says Call of Duty's Vanguard was Call of Duty's worst UK launch in 14 years. Xbox's new controller has Phil Spencer's autograph on it, which I really don't think I care. I don't think this is particularly a different controller. It almost feels like there would be buttons here, but I can't imagine a scenario where you would actually be able to hit these buttons. So I imagine these are actually just the mount points where the screws go in from a different side. We are definitely at a point though where in a year or so they need to start teasing and announcing a new controller. It would make a decent amount of sense for them to try a slightly modified controller. They're not going to change things greatly before releasing their next console in 4 or 5 years. Although, I guess I could also see the argument of putting a new controller with a new console, because you're not going to have much else as a sales point.
Colds has come in every shade imaginable.
Yeah, I could definitely see the next generation of consoles also being not particularly much more powerful, just because of the chip shortage, so a new controller may be the only real differentiator between the Xbox Series and whatever the next Xbox is called. Video Game Chronicle says Xbox Games Pass was originally designed as a rental service. Which, okay, so they had an idea, they evaluated it, they did something different. It's barely news, and clearly this only would have been mentioned. A lot of this is only being mentioned because there was the 20th anniversary show, which seemingly, while it did bring back 70 plus back title games, it has effectively completely ignored any new announcements or anything that would be even that interesting as an announcement.
Can I have those monostones?
The ordained hour has arrived.
Ooh, the magic tome. That your weak spot? I'll see you in
But
purgatory.
I guess the only thing I could really imagine that would have happened would have been, they would have announced like some secret game that they had been working on. Like Perfect Dark would have been the real thing to talk about there, since I believe Perfect Dark was like one of the first games, if not the first games, to come out. They released Halo's online multiplayer part for Halo Infinite, so that is definitely something. But
Lose yourself in this
like,
final dance.
feels like there should be like a 20th anniversary theme. It feels like you could have also given 20 cents to every single Xbox account that exists for a 20th anniversary. Or, frankly, you could have given $20 to every single Xbox account. And then that would have let people buy one game of their own liking. And still been quite a celebration. You could potentially look up what the 20-year anniversary actually is, and what present you're supposed to give after 20 years of marriage. And that could have been something also. Alright, let's start going through some games. We have a game here called Grave Knight, which looks like it's a visual novel. Although, frankly, it's a little bit different from a visual novel. Seems to use some dice rolls. It's coming soon, English, Portuguese, Brazil. I guess coming soon though. We'll wait until it has an actual release date. Here we have a game called City Zoomer, which just looks like an asset flip game for $2.99, 4 languages. Here we have a game called Monster X, which just looks like a Chinese MMO, but it's kind of hard to dismiss it specifically for that. $3.99, English and Chinese. Well, every screenshot here seems to show the same background, so it does feel like you're probably only fighting one monster, maybe 2 monsters, and that is it in this generic area. So that doesn't look like enough of a game. Here we have one called Lost Bubbles Sweet Mates, which doesn't really look like anything of interest. It's a I am bread game where you play as a bar of soap, I guess, or you're playing against each other in some kind of race. Yeah, I guess that's what it is you're racing. Yeah, it doesn't look like enough of a game to interest me. English and Japanese. Here we have a game called Punch It Deluxe, which looks like kind of a joke game. Although, seems like you're not even punching as much as you're choking.
Is fighting and despair all you
$4.49 English only. That can easily be a no. We have Anime Jigsaw Girls, which that can easily be a no. $1.79 English only. Here we have a game called Undemon, which is like a zoomed in, kind of pixely adventure game from the looks of it. Might be something here, so I'll give it a follow. $14.99 English and Korean. Here we have something that's all in Asian letters. It looks like it's an RPG Maker game. $3.59 Chinese only. Here we have a game called Spiderfire, which looks like nothing of interest. $1.39. Several Asian languages. Here we have a game called Blasting Courier, which looks like a Minesweeper clone. It's free, English, Bulgarian, and Turkish. Here we have a game called Cards of Patience, which Looks like you're just really playing freestyle solitaire, with maybe some RPG fantasy elements on top of it that make sense, but probably not. $4.49, several languages. Here we have a game called New York Rat Simulator, which I don't think I'd want to play a game as a rat. It's just a regular rat in New York, and it seems like this rat is fairly large. And this definitely feels like a joke troll game. $2.54, allegedly full audio.
I pray that you will
English.
be freed from suffering.
There we got a quick disconnect. I'm feeling fairly tired right now, so I probably should just go through the news and then try and burn through as many games as possible. I may just have to curate the games and that came out to the ones I actually want to talk about. Best Buy is selling the Xbox Series Halo Infinite console in stores today. Still getting a lot of these.
Prepare for defeat.
I lost my train of thought. I don't even know what I was saying. I sure hope this chair doesn't end up hurting my back every time I sit in it, because I don't have any way of moving it. This chair is an electric recliner chair that has very heavy electrical components to it. So, yeah. It also kind of has a weird thing where the feet don't kick out as well. They do kick out, but they're labeled weirdly because the chair is a particularly old person's chair that lifts up and helps you stand up out of the chair, which it's not a feature I probably would need too much of, but it is a feature that when you need it is going to be a lifesaver, potential actual lifesaver, frankly, if you're just stuck in it. Of course, an electric chair probably makes fairly large noise when it's moving. It just stuck the feet up. In the past few weeks, my kneecap has been hurting, and so instead of crossing my legs using the feet elevator, probably will help with that. Hopefully will help with that. But I do tend to lean and twist more than one should. Back to video game news though. Xbox execs wants to make game creation so accessible that anyone can become an overnight star, just as you've seen in music and video. Well, there is a real problem with that idea. If you're talking like YouTubers who make music and videos becoming not really overnight stars, but instead multi-years of hard work to potentially struggle to get some success. And in a lot of cases, YouTubers getting some level of success and then disappearing once they have enough money, or once they are uninterested in maintaining an audience, then you maybe have an argument. But if you're thinking like music, as far as anybody can be an overnight star in the music industry, that's not true. It's never been true. Those were always highly planned, produced, and thought out events that were just scripted to look like overnight stars. It's definitely not been true for movies. Like, almost every indie movie producer who made it big only made it big after years and years of struggle of making indie content.
Was delightful.
And definitely at the core of it, there's basically no way this could ever actually happen. There's no simplistic, fast way in which you can program that would make programming, even video games, look interesting
You have summoned the plague
enough
of
that people would
purgation.
become stars, like actual celebrities whose jobs are to be seen and to go out to events and just be a celebrity and take interviews, things like that. That's just not ever gonna happen.
This time.
You can bring change.
Programming is incredibly boring, and
Immorality tour begins.
I only know of one YouTuber that I watch that kind of actively does it, and even in that case, he's really more doing a Q&A session and barely looking at code and doing any real programming. If anything, I'm surprised that the YouTuber even accomplishes as much as he does for as little of typing,
You were done for.
like the small amount of typing he actually is doing. Later in this article, they say overnight development star, which maybe internally that makes a lot more sense, is that game creation could be so accessible. But this concept falls apart fairly crazy, and Sarah Bond, who is talking about this, is probably just a crazy SJW trying to push accessibility in ways that really don't make sense. Like, programming is fairly accessible as long as companies are willing to hire people with disabilities. If you're blind, you can actually type fairly well. If you're mute, you can program video games fine. It's a great job if you are mute. There aren't that many people that are mute out there, though, even compared to blind people. If you're deaf, you can program just fine. Again, a great job. If you're wheelchair bound and can't walk, or in any way, it's a great job for you already. So I don't know what class they specifically think is not accessible in the field of programming. It's one of the most accessible jobs I would say you could have.
It looks like I'm up.
You compare that to any other kind of physical labor, and there's going to be anything that requires any physical activity is going to be way more difficult than programming is. So if that's what they mean by accessible, which is what I assume they mean, is disabled people, that doesn't make sense. If they mean that there's a certain number of kids out there that are not being given the opportunity to be educated on how to program, okay, I guess maybe that would make a little bit of sense, that there's definitely some places that are doing bad jobs or just doing no effort whatsoever to teach programming. Although I feel like programming should be taught as a hobby, not as a potential career path for students. I could kind of see that. So if the argument of this whole article, which I'm not bothering to actually read, was they need to just give more copies of Microsoft Visual C# or C++ compiler to schools. Like, you're just not going to make the process of making a game. They talk about in this article Project Spark, which came out a while ago in 2013. And I don't remember it, so it obviously didn't really succeed. Microsoft does have some skin in the game, I would say, because there is the Scratch programming language, which Apple, I think, had a hand in, so Microsoft would like to be somewhat involved in a potential new engine / programming language, like Unity or Unreal Engine. Microsoft owns enough stores that would make sense. Alright, here we go. Well, the good news is I put my chair against the wall, so I can't have it lean back as far as it can. This chair actually can lean back to almost exactly horizontally flat. But I will say it can't go horizontally flat in an emergency situation fast enough, where somebody would potentially need to do CPR on somebody, which a medical device is. But I have now leaned the chair back and am now a couple more inches farther away from the microphone. I'm getting more comfortable than I probably should, but my back is killing me, so I'm making a specific exception today. Yeah, on one aspect, I could agree with this idea of taking it from the idea of being accessible for disabled people, which is what I took at first, because I think I was wrong about that, and putting it as it's accessible to just generally people. If Microsoft came out with something that was a DirectX 13 that was a full-on challenger to Unity or Unreal Engine, that would be very interesting. It would also allow Microsoft to take all these companies they own now and use an engine that they have built without having to pay a license for it, which would save them a decent amount of money. But you still would never get to a situation where you're actually a rock star by any means or a celebrity by any means because you're programming. And frankly, you wouldn't be a celebrity or overnight star in programming if you're just doing what everybody else can do on a more simplified programming platform. Standards would be incredibly low if you could just write a hello world demo test program and then you were getting entire applause, a round of applause for your hello world code. So even if the coding was simpler, you still have to be creative and efficient to write code to do something more than what the average programmer can do to be a rock star. And at a certain point, if you're capable of doing that, you would be capable of doing that in a more complicated code also.
Wait! Is it over already?
Play this. Video Games Chronicle says a 6-part Xbox documentary is coming to the streaming platforms in December. Covers the highs and lows of the Xbox. I don't really know if 6 parts is really necessary, talking about the history of Xboxes. Apparently it's streaming to YouTube, Redbox, IMDb TV, not B as in boy TV. B as in Victor. And then Roku. Just in general Roku, I guess. Oddly not on any other platforms that you'd kind of expect them to be on.
Smiles are the best medicine.
Your shining faith will carry you.
Wait, not yet!
Video Games Chronicle says over 3 days later, GTA Trilogy is back to PC minus the quote unintentional files, which would be, I guess, the files of the hot coffee mod. Unlicensed music, fuel game scripts with developer notes,
It won't be long
and
now.
the canned
Your life
minigame
comes
hot
to
coffee.
call on me again.
See, Take-Two has acquired Ollie Ollie developer Roll7. I thought we had already talked about that, but whatever. Xbox or Microsoft are shareholders, apparently. Not sure who. It says Xbox, but is that the Xbox division? In general, his underling employees? We'll just take it as written. Xbox is I don't know why there's a quote here. Is pushing Phil Spencer to line up a successor. Microsoft Gaming Division has got to outlive me, says the Xbox boss. It does feel like even on his own podcast, Phil Spencer is not showing up in a lot of the podcasts. So I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't too far away from announcing a succession plan which should already exist, and his replacement. I wouldn't be surprised if he's not really in charge in a year or so. Let's see, Elder Scrolls 6 Xbox exclusivity isn't about punishing PlayStation, says Phil Spencer. Which, okay, take that as written. Don't really care. Phil Spencer also says that Xbox Games Pass is very, very sustainable right now. Halo Infinite Season 1 has been extended through May 22. Matzer says Fire Dragon's Fistmaster Xiao Mei has been delayed to January 2022 in Japan, and Wings of Asteria has been delayed to 2022. So 2 more game delays. Genshin Impact has a new update, 2.3, on November 24th. A cooperative survival first-person shooter called Skier Ritual has been announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Looks like definitely several monstrosities. And I can't even watch this because I'm falling asleep too much. see this just keeps on running and happening is that I take too long to start, and then when I do start, I will talk too much and and I'm not catching up with these games. Salt and Sacrifice, Mage Hunting, Crafting, and Online Co-op. Gameplay is being shown off. Salt and Sacrifice is the sequel to Salt and Sanctuary. Stonks 9800, Stock Marking Simulator has been announced. I wouldn't be surprised if this game actually never comes out as a joke troll game. The Short Hike for PS4 and Xbox One launches November 16th. The Spirit and the Mouse launches late 2022. Which, yeah. Nobody Saves the World has a multiplayer feature trailer. I suppose this chair can't lift up and have people help them out of the chair if the legs are up, so I guess that does explain why the legs go up and down on the same button as the lift up part goes. Yeah, I'm really just so asleep. I thought I was going to end up taking a 5-hour energy drink, taking it like it's a drug, basically, while moving the furniture, and I managed to stay awake without it.
All you know?
But
Mother, father, come
there is
on.
going to be a day, certainly, when I'm going to end up having to drink that stuff again. It's terrible. Though, terrible for your health, I'm sure. Kung Fury Street Rage DLC A Day at the Beach is now available for PC. David Hasselhoff joins the fight. What is Kung Fury? Some kind of beat 'em up game. I'm gonna look into that right now. We might as well just do it now. So I guess I ignored the original game and shouldn't have. So let's just wishlist the original game. And then I guess you can't even put DLC on the follow list. So whatever.
Lots of bones, but make it fashion.
The adventure game Little Kitty Big City has been announced for consoles and PCs, which it looks like it's a fairly interesting low-down angle. It looks like there's a decent amount of animation here. This definitely feels like there's an actual game here. We'll check that out when it comes out. A new Project Awakening footage showcased at the Cygames Tech Conference, which I guess that's some video, some screenshots, not video. Let's see, they've got some screenshots of 2 more Demon Slayer characters being added to the Demon Slayer game. Matsuda Super Robot Wars sales have topped 19 million, which, like, the entire series of shipments and digital sales have topped 19 million, which is probably a somewhat small number, relatively speaking. Fantasy Life Online is going to end service on December 15th in Japan, which, okay, maybe that irritates Japanese people. A game called Buried Stars is coming to PC. It was a mystery adventure game currently available for the PS4, Switch, and PS Vita. Yep. Looks slightly interesting.
Uncharted Desert Awaits.
No!
Not 100% sure though if there's a ton of gameplay here. Looks like there's more than your standard visual novel, though. Tencent has acquired Soleil and Valhalla Game Studios' parent company, Wake Up Interactive. So, Tencent has acquired Wake Up Interactive, the parent company of Soleil and Valhalla Game Studio would be a better way to phrase that. Let's see, Rune Factory 5 version 1.1.0 update now available in Japan and has added same-gender marriage in Japan. I think that's a slight step forward, particularly since they're advertising it and not just sneaking it in. We are, I think, already talked about Ollie Ollie being acquired by Private Division. Oddworld Soulstorm Enhanced Edition launches November 30th for all of these platforms. A turn-based strategy game, Warhammer 40k Battle Sector, is coming to PS4, Xbox One on December 2nd. Outriders New Horizon update launches November 16th with a World Slayer expansion in 2022. Outriders is, I think, one of those games that I should have played and didn't get around to it if it's the game I'm thinking about, which very possibly it isn't the game I'm thinking about. Actually, I don't think it is the game I'm thinking about. See, GameDeveloper.com had Private Division acquiring them. We had already talked about Alan Wake developer Remedy opening a Swedish subsidiary in 2022. Sumo Group intends to become carbon net zero by 2025, which is really just to say they're going to buy carbon offset or carbon free energy from some other company. Sumo Digital, as a company, to my knowledge, does not actually produce electricity, so of course they'd be carbon zero. I'm surprised more people don't lie and say that's the case already. GameDeveloper.com says Microsoft releases Halo Infinite's multiplayer in advance of the game's launch, and then the 70 games being added to backwards compatibility. The 76 games here are 50 Cent Blood in the Sand, Beautiful Katamari. Some of these, like, I think some of these would be like the last ones that I had with the Xbox 360, which I got rid of my Xbox 360s in moving the furniture. Fear 1, 2, and 3. Oh, I can't even lean forward. I sure hope this chair doesn't end up turning out to be the problem. Like, it is very possible that if you have a chair that's so cushioned you're sinking in the wrong places and getting pressed in the back or poked in the back in the right places, or in the wrong places. Lego Lord of the Rings, I'm a little surprised it took them this long to get the Lego game. I hope that means all Xbox Lego games that ever were are backward compatible. The original Nier, Red Dead Revolver. Yeah, I imagine Time Splitters 2 and Time Splitters 1. I imagine this is probably most of the games you'd ever want to play. And it's not crazy to potentially go to a GameStop, get the Xbox 360 or even the original Xbox discs of these games, get yourself an Xbox Series S for cheap, and then you would have hundreds, if not close to 1,000 games that you could play very, very cheap. And for someone who hasn't played a lot of those games in the past, there's a lot of room there. It's a shame I didn't get one more ranked win because I think I could have won there. But I don't even want to start another game. Let's just try and go until I feel I can't go any further as far as game coverage, and then we'll call it a day. We need to cover some of these games. This looks somewhat interesting. It looks fairly rough too, though. Faded Memories Video Game Edition, $4.99, English full audio. I'll give it a follow. Here we have Mysterious Night, The First Night, Dark Screenshot Syndrome, Asset Flip Horror Game, English and Vietnamese, $2.54. Here we have a game called Nailed It, where you, I guess, using a nail gun in some level. It's a VR game, $4.49. Here we have a game called Remy Raccoon and Lost Temple, which looks like garbage, $2.54 English only. Here we have a game called Prototype Bollocks, which looks like nothing, $7.14 English and Russian. Here we have a game called Kupa Chevesto, which definitely sounds Russian, or Eastern Bloc of some sort. There might be an actual game here though. $5.59. We'll put it on the follow list. We'll see if it gets reviews and relevancy. Consume Thy Flesh, the pumpkin smashing sim. Too late, like coming out way too late for a Halloween game in the middle of November. $2.54 English only. Here we have another hidden object game called Search Out Candy. We'll just dismiss this. 59 cents, bunch of languages. Yeah. Here we have a game called Solaris Rift, which looks like it's some kind of card collecting game, card battler, free with single player only, no in-app purchases. This is a student project from DigiPen, so I'm going to put it on the wish list. But that's the only reason I'm putting it on the wish list, is because it's a student project. Here we have a game called Matchsticks, which honestly I haven't seen a good implementation of matchstick puzzles and jokes like this before. So this actually looks really good. $1.39 English, Portuguese, Brazil. Like, this is a great example of all you really need to do. Make something that kind of looks good, that works as potentially a cell phone game and as a desktop PC game, and just has a single screen, simple concept, and that's a great way to make something that is actually worth buying, as long as you don't overcharge. Here we have a game called Only Mine, which doesn't look interesting. Looks like it's a Defender clone. I think Defender is the name of the game. You're shooting things to keep them from hitting the ground. I guess at a certain point that might be a Juggler clone, the old Nintendo Game & Watch Juggler game. Here we have a game called Imitating Zombies, which looks like a very low effort garbage game. $1.19 English and Russian. Here we have Space Rocks Blockster for $1.99, which is obviously an Asteroids clone. Here we have a card game simulator, which I don't think that works compared to Tabletop Simulator. Yeah, it's free, but that's about the only good thing I think I would say compared to Tabletop Simulator. Here we have a game called Serious Breakdown, which looks like just a generic platformer of no interest. $1.79 English and Russian. Here we have a game called Noah Ra, The Conspiracy, which looks like there might be something there. Early access, English and French, full audio, $24.99 is very expensive. I'll put that on the follow list. Here we have a game called Tomb of the Lost Century, which looks like garbage. It's $4.49 English only. I guess what I want to do is see if I can get enough of these gone that I can see the beginning of the end, and that would be a good point to end this episode. This A equals B for $4.24 is garbage. Here we have a game called Brick Love, which is just tag nudity and mature things, and it's just a brick breaking game for 74 cents. Nothing there of real interest. Let's see, here we have a game called Acquiescence, which might be something, but I bet it really isn't. I'll give it a chance. Here we have a game called What is Gravity, which I am not really seeing much of a game here. It's some kind of Asian physics game or an Asian mathematics game. $3.59 English and Chinese. Have to say no to that. Here we have 1,000 Hidden Frogs for free to play. English only. I don't know why it's free to play though. Like, here we have a game called Urge, which looks like a low effort troll game. This doesn't look like anything. Early access, $16.19. Here we have a game called Living Art, which looks like garbage. $8.99 English only. Here we have a game called Tomb Keeper Mansion Deluxe Pinball, which I'm a sucker for pinball, so I'll put it on the fall list. $6.79 English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Love Choice, which looks like a visual novel of a decent level of animation. It's overwhelmingly positive already. $1.59. I guess I just put that on the wish list. We have a cart detailing simulator prologue, which we can just ignore because we're not going to cover prologues. We have a game called Splash Car here. Is this a game of any interest? No. Here we have a game called Alcara, which has a Stargate in it. Otherwise looks very uninteresting. Early access, $18.99. Yeah, I don't even know if I deserve to ask for subscribers and likes on these past two videos. They've been pretty bad as far as just getting things done. This game, Chaos Brigade, doesn't look very interesting to me. It looks kind of nicely polished, but not that good for a flat 2D. Here we have a game called Aruna. I'll still ask, certainly at the end of the stream, but yeah, I'm definitely not accomplishing things enough. Aruna looks uninteresting. $9.99. We have something called Door 2 Insignia, which I guess the question is Door 1. You have Door 2 Key. Now Door 3 Insignia. Door 1 is mixed reviewed. Door 2 is mixed reviewed. So I'm not gonna do anything about Door 3. Here we have a game called Gooby McGobblenuts Presents The Art of Dad Jokes Chapter 1, which obviously is a low effort RPG Maker garbage game. $1.19 English only. Here we have a game called Pack of Demons, which looks like nothing of interest. $8.99 English full audio. Here we have Sakura Forest Girls 3, which is yet another visual novel with anime girls from the Sakura series, or bearing the Sakura name. I think the Sakura games generally don't have any real nudity in them, so they're lewd at best, and that's it. And at that, I'm just gonna leave it. We've gone 2 hours and 20 minutes barely, but I just feel so tired that I feel like there's a high danger I'm just gonna fall asleep while streaming. Plus, I'm in obviously major pain. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.